18 years ago, Kanye released Diamonds from Sierra Leone, a song about the pain and suffering of black people who mined the diamonds on the chains that he wore so proudly. He felt conflicted about it because, on one side, the diamonds that he wore represented the new status of wealth and the new social status that he gained through the money he made in rapping. And on the other side, it came at the expense of the same black people that he had as a support to get there, right?
George Bush doesn't care about black people. You hear about slavery for 400 years? For 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all? You know, like, it's like we're mentally in prison. I like the word prison because slavery goes too direct to the idea of blacks. It's like slavery, Holocaust Jews, slavery is blacks. So prison is something that unites us as one race, blacks and whites being one race. That we're the human race.
JC called me, bro. You still ain't called me. JC called me. Hey, bro, JC, I know you got killers. Please don't send them at my head. Just call me.
You know, sometimes I ask myself, what changed between the man who literally just said, I think there's good in all people, especially Hitler, and that guy? Was it the values? Was it the target audience? Was it what changed, right? And it's easy to support Kanye when he says things like George Bush doesn't care about black people, when he says I want to empower more black creatives, when he says, you know, I want to be the richest black man. You can support that. It's definitely harder to support him when he says things like slavery was a choice. And you don't have to. And you shouldn't, honestly. You really shouldn't. When someone's wrong, you should not support them. When someone says hateful speech, you should not support them. And that doesn't mean you don't love that person. That doesn't mean you don't have appreciation for what that person did. It just means they're wrong. And that's the end of the conversation. But in Ye's case, a lot of people talk about, oh, he changed. Oh, he didn't used to be like this. Oh, it's not the same. And I'm here for a rebuttal to that. Ye didn't change. 2004, MTV VMAs. Kanye loses the Best New Artist award to Gretchen Wilson and walks out. Does that break a social norm? Yeah, absolutely. You don't walk out because you didn't win an award. That's not acceptable. But then again, his first album, The College Dropout, reached number 2 on the Billboard 200. And he had a number 1 hit song, Slow Jams, on it. Close friend of him, Alicia Keys, tried to comfort him backstage. After 30 minutes, it didn't work. And he talked about it on Diamonds from Sierra Leone. We also have to look at Ye and his entire trajectory as an artist when we talk about this. Coming from what could essentially be called a late bloomer, a guy who became a rapper in his late 20s, early 30s. To even record that album was a battle for Kanye West, who was seen as a producer by his peers throughout his career and can be considered a late bloomer because of that, because he released his first album in his late 20s and he peaked, or at least he got his fame in his 30s, which is pretty old for a rapper. Hip-hop's a young man's game. You're telling me that after releasing what is now seen by most people as a classic, the start of a trilogy of albums that are widely recognized, couldn't grab him the Best Newcomer award, and that anger wasn't justified? Personally, I would be mad. I definitely would, and that's just a human reaction to it. Ye had to battle hip hop, his own community, for defying stereotypes, and then had to get validation from his musical peers, who then did not recognize him as the best newcomer. And his lashing out was breaking social norms. That is who Ye is. When you think about it, that's always what he's did. It's always what he's done. Whether it be with coming out with an album that was emotionally vulnerable at the peak of gangster rap. Like, I need you guys to understand this. We are talking about 2004. 50 Cent dropping. DMX just finishing his run on how he was the hardest nigga in town. Jay-Z dropping big sounding Mafia albums. Puff Daddy still in the mix. Jadakiss, Ja Rule. All those guys. Like, peak era of gangster rap. And this dude, this college educated dude who's known more as a producer than a rapper, comes out with an album about being vulnerable, wanting to wear pink polos and designer, and comes out in these interviews and tackles every subject: misogyny in hip hop, transphobia, homophobia. In 2004, we're talking about a guy who cited his icon as Lauryn Hill and Mos Def and Mace. Three artists who also did break the standards of hip hop in their own ways. Mace by walking away at the top and starting to do Christian music, and always having a kind of positive sounding music, even though his record label itself was just the record label for gangster rappers. Lauryn Hill being Lauryn Hill, and Mos Def just through his lyricism highlighting the pain and plights of black people. And he followed in those footsteps. He absolutely did. He's one of the greatest rappers of all time, and there's really no debate here. But people will still argue to this day that he's carried by his production talent. It's stupid. It's not a debate. Kanye is a voice for all the marginalized communities within hip-hop.
Everybody in hip-hop discriminates against gay people. To me, like, that's one of the standards of hip-hop, is to be like, yo, you fag, you gay. Matter of fact, the exact opposite word of hip-hop, I think, is gay. Like, yo, you play a record and it's like whack, that's gay, dog. You know, if it's good, that's that hip-hop right there. You see what I'm saying? It's like the exact opposite. So it's like me speaking for my entire culture, or me looking at my rappers out there, hip-hoppers discriminate against gay people. Mm-hmm. I wanted to just come on TV and just tell my rappers, just tell my friends, like, yo, stop it, fam. Mm-hmm. Like seriously, that's really discrimination. To me, that's exactly what they used to do to black people. I'm just trying to tell people, just stop all that.
That's how he's carried himself, and that is what he's been from the very start. Producers, he was one. Homosexuality, he called it out when it wasn't a good thing, it wasn't a cool thing to call it out. There was no debate. There was no discussion about homophobia in hip hop. And like you said in an interview, the opposite word of hip hop when he came into the culture was gay. He said it in an interview, quote, when you heard a beat and the beat was whack, people would say like, oh, that's gay. And I just want to tell everyone, while America's listening, stop it. His words, not mine. 2004, once again. Breaking gender norms through clothing. He's done it time and time again. He did it, once again, as a pioneer. Supporting and acknowledging trans people. I mean, I think he's done that probably the most out of any hip-hop figures that is not an active member of the LGBTQ community. He took the risk at a time where hip-hop was, quite frankly, an extremely misogynistic sphere, an extremely homophobic sphere, to highlight those problems and call them out on his debut album with his record label against him, while taking the risk to just flunk his career from the jump by going against what was the established norm. And that's something that he's kept on going and kept harboring and holding through his career. It has not changed. It didn't change then. It hasn't changed now. What changed are the topics and the issues that he chooses to call out. And we all disagree with him on that. Anti-Semitism isn't an issue where you can have a nuanced stance on. You call it out. Racism isn't an issue where you can have a nuanced stand on. And it might be a debate to some people listening, but to me, I know it's not. As a black man, I don't have that luxury. If I see racism anywhere, I have to call it out, whether it be towards me, whether it be towards other people. I can't stand here and not categorically disagree and call it out, because it's an issue that affects me every day. And quite frankly, it's an issue that's made my life, my people's life, my ancestors' life much less enjoyable than other races' lives, because we are constantly the target of it. And Kanye has stuck to that throughout his career. Let me give you some examples, though, before y'all click off. Right. Before Kendrick, before Cole, it was Kanye. When DMX was dropping slurs on record and getting paid for it, Kanye was wearing pink polos. When Tyler, the Creator, Lil Nas X, and Young Thug were wearing dresses and wearing clothes that not necessarily even affirmed their sexuality, but just broke the code around what was acceptable for a black man to wear in society, Ye was doing it 10 years back. When it came to creating a community where it might not be the most welcoming to come out as a gay artist, but you can do it, Ye had a big part to play in that. There will be none of the artists that I name without Ye. That is simply a fact. Ye broke these barriers. And yeah, he did it in a braggadocious way. But every rapper believes in himself. Is the nature of the game. And he was still vulnerable throughout it. He's the guy who has a song called Big Brother, which is quite literally about him seeking the validation of another black man and being hurt when he didn't get it. That's the entire point of the song. My big brother was Big's brother. Used to be Pac and Big Brother. And he talked about when he came up to Jay and told him, hey, I want to rap. And Jay was like, no, stick to the beats. That hurt him. And he put that track on a record. Once again. Got that through his label. Got that through his PR rep. Got that through Rockefeller and Def Jam. Released it on an album. When, to this day, black men cannot speak about their respect or their admiration of another black man comfortably without being labeled as gay, or without eyebrows being raised about the nature of your affection with someone. Even when you're just talking about someone, you're like, yo, I love you. Saying that to a black man sometimes is an issue. Sometimes you gotta add, I love you, nigga. Sometimes you gotta be like, hey, I appreciate you, I rock with you, whatever. Like, the word love is an entire conversation that is just avoided in our community because of the stigma around it. But that's Kanye Omari West. Vulnerable, open, and opinionated. 2016, Kanye has a rant on stage. Kim gets robbed in Paris. He cancels the last 21 concerts of his The Life of Pablo tour. And he ends up in the hospital for paranoia. He gets diagnosed with bipolar disorder. According to the American Psychiatric Association, bipolar disorder is a brain disorder that causes changes in a person's mood, energy, and ability to function. People with bipolar disorder experience intense emotional states that typically occur during distinct periods of days to weeks called mood episodes. Does that sound like Kanye? For a lot of us, that's where we signed off on Ye. And by that I mean black people. There's no sort of logical thinking behind a statement like that. For me, it's where I started challenging the set of beliefs of a man that I looked up to. Where I went like, okay, you know, as the saying says, hell, the way to hell is paved with good intentions, but it's the way to hell nevertheless, right? That's when I was like, I can't agree with everything you say. I can get where you're coming from. I can try to understand it. I won't sometimes. I didn't understand that comment. I didn't agree with that comment. I watched the whole interview. I still disagree with the comment. I understood what he was trying to say. I resonate with Ye when it comes to two things about the black community. Our people are all that we have, and despite all the talks about allyship and the support that, you know, we get whenever there's major civil rights or police brutality issues, whether that be George Floyd, whether that be the Civil Rights Act, at the end of the day, there is a lot of bitterness in the community because that support is conditional, and that support does not come based on values, but based on the portrayal of trauma in media. It always seems like someone has to die for people to call out racism, and then things go back to how they were. And on that, I agree with you. And the second thing that I agreed with was that black people need to look beyond their biases for survival. We are 13% of the population in America. We are maybe 6% of the population in Canada. And globally, we are the most exploited population in the world. We have to reach out to other communities for survival. There's no other choice. And a lot of what he said from 2016 to 2019 was about that. No matter how ill-spoken it was, no matter how badly he said it. You know, it was a time period where he preached a message of love in his own little fucked up way. We weren't at the bad part yet, surprisingly, even though it felt like it. It's a longer conversation for another video, but he's right about that. And from there on out, his statements got more erratic. As he said himself in multiple interviews, he was off his medication for bipolar disorder. Following an addiction to opioids, he just decided to go off his meds, and it went downhill from there quite a lot. And for a while, it was a weird but kind of acceptable Kanye. He liked Trump, but he also preached love and tolerance. He wore the MAGA hat, but he also denounced the hatred that it represented and the people who saw it as a racial separation. And throughout the year, musically, 2018, he was extremely productive. He produced Daytona, he released Ye, he released Kids See Ghost, he worked on Tiana Taylor's album. He was everywhere, really.
Easy went crazy too that year.
Yep. 2019, he had Sunday Service and Jesus King, which was a gospel album. And then 2020 happened. In the midst of the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and so many more, in the midst of COVID, people looked up to artists to speak on the issues that were going on. Most notoriously, socially conscious artists who were black. Whether that be J. Cole, whether that be Kendrick Lamar, whether that be Kanye West. People looked up to them to be leaders, to be spokespersons, as they were men of letters. And Ye stayed silent. He didn't stay inactive, but he was definitely silent, and that silence spoke volumes. Unfortunately, when you have a platform, it's your responsibility to use it. At the very least, I believe that, to use it for what you stand for and to make the world a better place, at the very least for the people that you care about. Publicly, we never heard from Ye, but he did do quite a lot. He did donate about $2.5 million to George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor's families. He covered their legal fees. He set up a college fund for George Floyd's daughter. He also worked with Yeezy Home on designing affordable housing made of prefabricated concrete homes. He, as well, set up the Larry Hoover benefit concert in 2021 with Drake in an attempt to have Larry Hoover released from prison and eventually settle down the gang violence in Chicago, which he has spoken about a lot, admittedly. But publicly, it seemed his focus was on getting out of his distribution deal with Sony. And I want you guys to keep that in mind, because before the anti-Semitism comments, he spoke about his distribution deal quite a lot and how he wanted to own his masters. He released his contract publicly in full extent on Twitter. And he was called erratic for those behaviors, which is quite honestly true. It is an erratic thing to release a business contract. But he said himself, he needed our help, or that is what that is how he saw it. And of course, you can't talk about 2020 without talking about Kanye 2020. This dumbass nigga ran for president. And he had some speeches about abortion and how he was going to abort his kids, but then he didn't. And that's why he's anti-abortion. About how, you needed to go back to God. A lot of dumb shit. Again, don't agree with it. Mad pro-choice. But, it was a rough time. Like, it was definitely a difficult time. You could see clearly for him, clearly for his marriage. He was trying to get divorced. Was locked up in a ranch in Wyoming just doing music and going on public appearances about his presidential campaign. And quite frankly, it was erratic. Was that because of bipolar disorder? Was that just a continuation of the person he is? We don't know. At the end of the day, we don't know this man. But it was definitely a continuation of the Kanye West that has been the public figure who speaks out about whatever issues he believes in, with the same amount of passion, with the same amount of opinion, whether they be right or wrong. Once again, I'll bring it back to George Bush doesn't care about black people. It's a statement that we can agree, and that is why it's such a recognized statement. But he still used that same passion to say, I was going to abort my kids and God saved them. Regardless of how you feel about it. It was the same passion in it. And even though when you look at his actions, like him putting money into the families of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, his public statements always seem to paint him as the opposite of what his actions do, which is a conflicting point for me. In the sense that, like, when you look at him based on his hiring practices, based on his business ventures, based on his charity ventures, it's always very black-centered. You know, whether it be forcefully pushing black creatives at the top of some of the top brands in high fashion to this day. A lot of people, and when I mean a lot of people, I truly mean a lot of people who are black, worked for Kanye West, and ended up being head designers at Balenciaga, Louis Vuitton, Ralph, Marc Jacobs, etc., etc., etc. Those doors were opened by having a company that had a black CEO in Kanye, and who was like, I want black creatives in these spheres because these guys are better and they're not getting those opportunities, just like I didn't get those opportunities. And that is a fact. There's a simple fact, whether it be the introduction of Virgil's assistants into higher positions at Balenciaga and at LV, whether it be even his collaborations with Virgil and the fact that Virgil did at some point work for Kanye, whether it be even outside of black people, Demna's involvement with Yeezy before joining Balenciaga, that was Ye. Whether it be in music, where undeniably he's put a lot of black people out of poverty. Big Sean will say it himself. He hates Kanye, but hey, Kanye bought his grandma a house. Whether it be guys like Designer, all the artists on good music, all the producers in the back, all the sound engineers, all the A&R, the PR reps, the agents, etc., etc., etc. Kanye has had an ethnically diverse but still majoritarily black team throughout his career. The amount of people that he's put in positions of success from the black community is undeniable, and it was a conscious effort, and it still is. Even when he started Donda Sports, the athletes that he signed all happened to be black. And you know, it's a weird reality that for a guy who has public statements that go against anything pro-blackness, his actions tend to lean towards pro-blackness. And, you know, he'll say his favorite guy is Donald Trump. It's a twisted reality, but it is who he is at the end of the day.
I didn't have a lot to say. I had a lot to learn. And, you know, right now you'll document where I'm at. I felt the need to speak at this point. You know, when you look up 5 years from now or 10 years from now, I'll have more experience. I'll be in a better place than I was today. But it's good for you to see, you know, there'll be mistakes, there'll be flaws in the way I communicate today, because we're human beings, we're flawed. I'm not media trained, I'm not studied in that, I'm not trying to say the right thing. I'm just saying exactly what I feel out of love.
I want to preface this by saying that this is not an invitation to anti-Semitism or an opening to blanket statements about the relationship between black and Jewish communities. Anti-Semitism is wrong at all times. I don't stand for it. It's not something you should stand for, and it's not something that you should accept. You see it, you call it out. End of the discussion. The following is just an observation on the relationship between the black and Jewish community. I disagree with Ye on his statements about Hitler. He was wrong, he was ignorant, and it's simply not a conversation. That's where it ends. From the viewpoint of Black people historically, Jewish people exploiting Black art and Black people has been a topic, and that is simply a fact. It's not an isolated viewpoint to see Jewish people as a symbol of financial wealth, and that stems from stereotypes. But in the Black community, it also stems from power structures within the relationship between the Jewish and the Black community. As Martin Luther King stated, during the Civil Rights era, they used to have rent strikes, and a lot of times the owners that they would do rent strikes against were not white, they were Jews, because Jewish people used to own a lot of buildings in disenfranchised communities, and they used to have a color tax that was a 20% tax on Black people who used to rent in their buildings. Once again, I'll have my sources in the comments. That is simply a statement and a fact. That sentiment has lingered into our community. It's not isolated to Kanye. Black people are mad at Kanye because of his slavery comments. Jewish people are mad at Kanye for his anti-Semitism. Different reasons, same sentiment. Anti-Semitism is an addition to the reasons to be mad for Black people. And Jewish people and Black people have had a tumultuous relationship in the past, I'd say decades to last century, in America and worldwide as well. Because there has been a narrative that both communities are united and allied when it comes to social issues, and the reality is that it has not always been reciprocated or the reality when it comes to Black people. In America, North and Latin America, and particularly in the Caribbeans, Jewish people participated in slavery. Some Jewish people owned slaves. Example I can give, Charleston, North Carolina, where 83% of Jewish people owned slaves compared to 87% of white people. In the Caribbean, it was a bit more pronounced. It was also pronounced in Latin America and Brazil. And some Jewish people even fought for the Confederacy during the American Civil War for the right to keep slaves. It's not a fact that's spoken about because we are relatively ignorant about our history, and because it's just like everything about slavery, we don't talk about it, or when we talk about it, it's in large blanket statements about how it was bad and how it should not happen again. But it is a fact nevertheless. Some Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews, ethnically West European, East European, and Spanish Jews, did participate in colonization as well. In South Africa, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies supported apartheid until 1985 and didn't release any statement condemning the apartheid until 1985, despite some members of the Jewish community, to their credit, bringing it up to the Board of Deputies and bring up measures to counter apartheid. The Board of Deputies refused to even denounce it until 1985. To give you context, apartheid was abolished in 1993, and it lasted for about half a decade in South Africa. For the past 50 years, instances of Black Jews being refused in synagogues have been popping up regularly around the world, and have been called out in different countries in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa even, and in America as well. Ethiopian ties to Judaism run deep, and Ethiopian Jews sometimes aren't even accepted in certain synagogues in Israel, and there have been recently, as in 2022 recently, and still happening, protests regarding Black migrants and Ethiopian migrants in Israel happening at a regular frequency, especially following the death of a migrant this year in Israel, regarding the legitimacy of their Jewish background, the legitimacy of their presence in Israel, and the legitimacy of their faith. Now, Israel has recognized Ethiopian Jews as people that fall under, I believe, their law of return to the nation. I'm not sure about the terms, but I'll have it linked below. However, the reality is that they are still treated as second-class citizens, even within Israel, and the apartheid state that is Israel treats them as second-class citizens and not as members of the ruling class despite their religion. And that runs down to color. When it comes to America, and particularly when it comes to Kanye, black artists have had gripes with Jewish executives for as long as it can be remembered. Jewish people were part of what grew jazz music, but they were also the main exploiters of jazz music. They would be the ones who would book black artists at segregated clubs, but they would keep most of the earnings. They were the ones who would have the record labels, but that also meant that the artists did not get paid or compensated fairly. In hip hop, one of the greatest beefs of all time, one of the most known beefs of all time, regards Ice Cube and a Jewish man that you might have heard of called Jerry Heller. And has that led to anti-Semitic comments? Most certainly. Should these anti-Semitic comments be called out? 100%. Does that change the reality that most of the executives and owners in the music industry through record labels and in Hollywood through production companies are Jewish? It does not change that statement. Are these industries built on the exploitation of black art? Absolutely. So, coming from that point of view, the sentiment of animosity by some black people towards Jewish people is not only understandable, but rooted in the same reality as it is towards white people and their history in the suffering of black people worldwide. The difference with Kanye is that Kanye also happens to be anti-Semitic, which makes his statements null and void because they're rooted in hate and not rooted on that history. His experience with it is being stuck in a bad contract that was signed by a Jewish person. The support that came from a certain part of the black community comes from our collective history with Jewish people. The predatory nature of the music industry and of Hollywood just focuses on exploiting black art and black people. And that is why you might not hear a lot of black people speak about how outraged they are about the anti-Semitism, because to them, just like James Baldwin said, a white person never asked me for rent. It was a Jew. Now, if you combine that with ignorance, you get Kanye West statements and you get some idiot African descendants of slavery who believe that they are the true black Hebrew Israelites because of the suffering that they have had. Completely wrong. Completely anti-Semitic. We should call it out. But what we should not do, and what we should actively encourage to stop those flawed beliefs, is understand where it comes from and why it's so widespread within the black community because of history. And I just wanted to finish this video on a more personal note about Kanye West. I tried to cover more or less why he hasn't changed throughout this video, because I've seen a lot about how, some people speculate, his mother dying is what changed his behavior, or his divorce is what's changing his behavior. And certainly some of these things can exacerbate it, but ultimately these are just his opinions mixed with a bipolar disorder, mixed with a person who's always been outspoken. And his methods haven't changed. He's always been outspoken in interviews. He's always dropped some music speaking on it. And to be quite honest, him talking about Jewish people owing him money has been very common in his music. It's just we don't tend to listen when it's in the music. I invite you to go listen to St. Pablo if you want to see, and you'll see that back in 2016 he was talking about it. I think that at some point the message of love that he was preaching turned into hatred, and he might still believe that he has that love in his heart, but the way that he conveys it is simply wrong, and the beliefs he harbored are backwards. That's how it is. Now, I understand why a lot of people, mostly fans, are disappointed in him, expect better from him. But at the end of the day, we don't know that man. We can't change that man. And all we can do is prevent people from continuing those flawed beliefs by sparking meaningful change to the issues that he called out and to the hate that he believes in equally. So with that being said, I invite you all to take a moment of reflection and honestly look through this man's brilliant catalog. And if you don't want to support him, download that shit as an MP3 and listen to it offline. But look through his catalog. Learn about black struggles. Learn about Jewish struggles beyond the Holocaust. And I'm gonna have some links in the description. And for me personally, I'd say Kanye is still someone I'll listen to. Definitely. I'm still gonna watch his interviews. And I'm still gonna be tremendously disappointed by the statements that he made, not only about Hitler, but the statements that he made about George Floyd's death, the statements that he made about black on black crime, the statements that he made about abortion being black death. But more than anything, I think it's going to be someone that I'm going to want to have a conversation with, and hopefully I can get to that point someday. And someone that I would say I used to admire, but I don't anymore. Because, like it or not, it is a successful black man who has never committed a crime, who is in the music industry, who is college educated, and who by every single measure and every single metric beat the odds to become an influential person, a rich person, and a model until the most recent events. I think my only question is, the only metric that we don't know about is Kanye a happy person? And maybe we'll get the answer someday. Maybe we won't. But like he said, someday we'll all be free.